Okay, so I wanted to talk about this document that just came out yesterday because I'm seeing a lot of people looking at it and thinking that it means something different than it really does because they're just glancing, I think, and they're also using it for their own confirmation bias about Dylan, especially. But here is the document I'm talking about. Now, this document was filed last year, but it just was one of the ones released by the court after both sides and Hippler reviewed them to see what redactions might be needed. But it is the Defense's Exhibit 1A in support of affidavit and objection to the state's motion in limine regarding text messages and testimony. So it is the one that contains Dylan's full phone activity from around 2 a.m. on. Now, something I want to say first, in this document, we get to see the unredacted name of the individual that she added as a new phone contact at 3:51 in the morning. I'm not going to post their name. Yes, I know it's unredacted in the document, but please be ethical, be respectful. I'm already seeing people try to figure out everything they can about her, and they're getting frustrated because they're finding several people that have the same name. And what happens when you do that is oftentimes content creators will get the wrong person, and then it's just not a good situation. And even if you have the right person, it's not a good situation. Just because their name's in that document does not mean that's an open invitation to put a microscope on their life and try to dig up anything you can about them. That person had nothing to do with the murders. Nothing. So I'll leave them alone. Okay. So with that said, let's get started. Now, one of the things you're going to notice, and because it's a defense filing, I completely understand why they did it this way. They listed everything by the cookies loading. So if you just accessed a site but didn't really do anything on it, every time a cookie loads, it's on the list. Anytime you sent or received a Snapchat, it's on there, and it puts out a big long list, making it look like the activity was more than it actually really was. Here's an example. Okay, this one from the cookies from Indeed are all listed. And this isn't all of it. It goes on to another page. But Dylan accidentally hit Indeed. You can tell because she was only on there for seconds. But the list makes it look like she was on there for a lot longer. So it is very deceptive if you aren't looking at it the correct way. And I also wanted to discuss this from Ann Taylor, which was in another one of the defense filings about the motion in limine regarding the text messages. She says, the second grouping of messages the state claimed fit within the exception to the hearsay rule are those from DM to her roommates beginning at 10:23 a.m., 6 hours later. The state claims DM woke up and realized her roommates had not responded to her earlier texts. The state is wrong. DM was awake. She was messaging on Snapchat, she was on Instagram, and she was texting with her dad. And this is not an exhaustive list of activity on her phone. She was with BF, who was communicating with her parents and then later friends. Now, obviously, as a defense attorney, her job defending her client is to try to cast reasonable doubt. And she was doing a good job with that because a lot of people read that and thought, well, Dylan and Bethany lied. They weren't asleep. They never lied, okay? They never told investigators they were asleep for 8 hours. If you listen to them talk in their interviews, they made it very clear that they were dozing off and on, that they had woken up here and there, that they had spoke to parents, that they had spoke to friends, that they were messaging. We know that there was the flurry of messages from Dylan to everyone in the house. I mean, but Dylan, when she woke back up around 10, because you'll see that there was periods of inactivity where the girls slept, she realized none of them were still answering. And we'll see that as we go through these things. But I just wanted to put that in there because Anne was trying to shade it one way, and it really is not the way she was trying to shade it. They never said they were asleep for 8 hours. But I want to get started I'm not going to show the whole document on here. I've written my notes, but the first thing in the document, you can follow along in the document, is Dylan texted Eric Gower. He was the rideshare driver, and she had just asked him if he was still out driving, and that was at 2:10 a.m., 2:10 and 30 seconds. Then she went on Snapchat. She was on Snapchat from 2:11:17 to 2:12:09, so less than a minute. And then there's no activity, okay? Gower texted her back at 2:13, but she does not see that message until 4:29 in the morning. So she must have been dozing off at that point, or had gotten off her phone and maybe was looking at a book or something before she went to sleep. But right after that, there's no activity from 2:13 a.m. till 3:51 a.m. So that's about a, 1.5 hour time frame, an hour and a half time frame where she had no activity on her phone. Now, at 3:51 a.m., that's when she added the contact in her phone. Now, people might be like, well, what was she doing up adding a contact? Have you ever gone to bed where before you went to bed, there was something that you had been thinking about and you couldn't remember, like a name or a song title, or you talked to somebody earlier and said, oh yeah, I'll do that when I get home, and then you didn't? And guess what happens? Inevitably, middle of the night, you're tossing and turning, and all of a sudden you go, oh, that's the name of the song. Or, oh my gosh, I forgot to do that for so-and-so. I'm willing to bet that Dylan had met this person earlier, like at the party or something, or somebody from class, and was like, oh, I was supposed to add her into my contact. Okay, so honestly, of all the things you want to try to pick apart to try to say she's not credible, that is a weird one to do that on, because that happens to most people, that middle of the night remembering something. Okay, so right after that, it's not too long after that when she starts hearing what's going on in the house. And of course, not realizing at the time anybody's being murdered. But I think she added the contact and then started to drift back asleep. We go to the next activity on her phone, which is at 4:19:07 when Bethany calls Dylan. Because by then Bethany saw what she thought was a firecracker and light under her door and everything. Then here's where the whole flurry starts of Dylan desperately trying to get a hold of everybody, contacting Bethany, etc. So 4:20 to 4:20:28, she tries calling Kaylee and Xana. Sorry, trying to read my notes. At 4:20:28, right after that, she calls Bethany. She talks to her for 41 seconds. Then she tries calling Maddie at 4:21:50. Those phone calls totaled right around 2 minutes. Okay, it's not long periods of time here. Then she starts texting. She texts Bethany at 4:22:08, 4:22:11. Then she texts Kaylee at 4:22:39. Then she texts Kaylee again and says, what's going on? Well, the first time she texted her, she just said her name, Kaylee. So at 4:22:43, she says, what's going on? Then Bethany texts Dylan at 4:23:15 and says, yo, dude, what the F? Then Bethany to Dylan again. Xana was wearing all black. That was at 4:23:28. Dylan to Bethany. I'm freaking out right now. That was at 4:23:33. Then Dylan to Bethany. No, it's like ski mask almost. And you can tell by her writing, she's frantic. That was at 4:23:42. Then Bethany to Dylan. Shut the fuck up. Bethany to Dylan. Actually, that was all at 4:23:48 to 52. So like I say, mere seconds. Dylan to Bethany. It was like he had something over his forehead, a little, and mouth. That was at 4:23:52. Dylan to Bethany. I'm not kidding. Oh, I'm so freaked out. That was at 4:24 a.m. Bethany to Dylan. So am I. 4:24:07. Dylan to Bethany. My phone is going to die. Fuck. That was at 4:24:11. Bethany to Dylan. Come to my room. That was at 4:24:14. Then she says, oh, right after she says, come to my room, then Dylan tries calling Ethan. That's at 4:24:39. Then Bethany texts her at 4:24:56 and says, run, and then again says, down here. Then Dylan texts Bethany and says, I'm scared though. That was at 4:24:59. Bethany to Dylan, yeah, I know, but it's better than being alone. That was at 4:25:16. So then right after that, Dylan has an Apple call at 4:27:11. It doesn't say on there who it was to. I don't know if maybe she accidentally hit like FaceTime or something. Then Dylan goes on Snapchat. And she had said in her interview that she was trying to Snapchat all the roommates also. So you can see it's all outgoing. So there's an outgoing snap at 4:27:11, one at 4:27:30, and one at 4:27:40. Then she tries calling Kaylee again at 4:27:47. Then she tries calling Xana again at 4:28:44. Then she texts to Kaylee again and says, please answer. That's at 4:32:58. The total time for all of that was a little under 11 minutes. So you can see how quickly, how fluid that was going, how frantic. Then there's no activity on Dylan's phone from 4:32:58 to 5:02:54. So obviously that's when she went down to Bethany's room. So for about a half an hour, no activity on her phone. Then at 5:02:54 to 5:02:56, she edits a photo. And from 5:17:31 to 5:19:48, she edits a photo. So that's mere seconds. I mean, if you want to put it together like a total thing from the 5:02 and then to the 5:17, I mean, I guess you could try to say she was on there for 15 minutes, but they're showing the starting and stopping time. So it's a total of 2 minutes and 19 seconds that she was editing photos. Then there's no activity for 1 hour. Okay. So we have no activity for 1 hour. That was 5:19:48 to 6:19:05. Then from 6:19:05 to 6:19:16, and then 6:25:08 to 6:25:11, she was editing photos and videos again. So that ends up being a total time of, if you just look at the timestamp, seconds. If you put them all together, like 6:19 to 6:25, that's like 6 minutes. So total, she was editing photos for like 8 minutes max. Okay. People are trying to act like she was editing photos from 5 o'clock clear to 6:30. No, she was not. There's a whole gap of 1 hour where she's not even on her phone in there. Then there was no activity from 6:25 to 8:05. So an hour and 40 minutes, no activity. She probably was trying to sleep or did fall asleep. That was one of those times when, they had said they were in and out of sleep. Now, from 8:05:43 to 8:06:17, she's on Instagram. And then 8:10:54 to 8:11:16, and then 8:13:32 to 8:14:20. So the total is about 3 minutes that she's on Instagram. Now that coincides with when Bethany had spoke to her dad about her toothache, and you'll recall in Bethany's interview, she said that she told Dylan about it too. So she probably woke up Dylan when she was speaking to her dad, and then Dylan checked Instagram, and she was probably checking Instagram to see if anybody had messaged or posted anything. Then there's no activity again on Dylan's phone from 8:14:20 to 10 o'clock. So an hour and 45 minutes, no activity again. It's back to sleep or trying to get some sleep. Then at 10 o'clock a.m. and 43 seconds to 10 a.m. and 45 seconds, she's on Instagram. So 2 seconds. Then Snapchat from 10 a.m. and 56 seconds to 10:01 and 40 seconds. So 1 minute on Snapchat. Then Instagram, 10:01:53 to 10:03:05, so approximately 2 minutes. Here's the Indeed one that everybody keeps trying to villainize her over. It was from 10:03:30 to 10:04:02, so like 30 seconds. It was obviously fat fingers, probably frantically trying to hit Instagram or something else, accidentally hit Indeed. Then she's on Snapchat from 10:04:54 to 10:05:32, so a minute. Snap again from 10:19:57 to 10:23:02, so 4 minutes. Then she texts Maddie, "Are you up?" That's at 10:23:34. So those snaps and Instagram, I believe when she's saying she was still trying to hear from them and message them, that's what it was. So she texts Maddie. Then she goes back on Instagram from 10:24:01 to 10:25, so that's 1 minute. Snap from 10:30:18 to 10:31:08, 1 minute. Snap from 10:45:29 to 10:45:43, less than a minute. Instagram, 10:56:49 to 11:04:51, so approximately 8 minutes on Instagram. Then she's back on Snap again for like 2 seconds, like 11:02:02 to 11:02:02, so like a second. Probably just accidentally hit it or got a reply back from someone. that I imagine she was, I mean, we don't know all these snaps, but I imagine she was probably asking their other friend group if they had heard from any of them. Then she's on Instagram from 11:07:26 to 11:07:28 and 11:09:40 to 11:10:14. So a little over a minute. Instagram again, 11:11:13 to 11:11:22, 11:14:58 to 11:15, so 4 minutes. Back to Snap, 11:15:03 to 11:17:43, so just a couple minutes. Now she opens up Instagram at 11:29:08. When she has that open, she texts Kaylee and says, "Are you up?" And that was at 11:29:28. And then she's on Instagram again till 11:30:07. So about a minute and a half on Instagram, but that text was also in the middle of it. Then she's back on Snap, 11:29:56 to 11:29:58, 11:30:37 to 11:32:45. So about 3 minutes. Yik Yak. It just says she accessed it. It just says 11:35:26, so she didn't really spend any time on Yik Yak. And then TikTok accessed 11:36:07 to 11:36:25, so she was basically on there for 20 seconds. She was not watching TikToks. It looks like a whole long list because, like I said, the defense tried to make it look that way, but she was on there for like 20 seconds. Then she's back on Snap, 11:37:36 to 11:38:47, so a minute. Then her dad texts her at 11:39:17. Dylan replies at 11:39:41. Her dad responds back to her at 11:40:14, but Dylan did not see that until 1:04 in the afternoon. Then Jenna texts Dylan and says, "Bro, that was at 11:50:55. Dylan did not read that until 2:12:23 in the afternoon. So she obviously was concerned about something else, and I imagine that's trying to get a hold of Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, Xana. She's back on Instagram, 11:44:06 to 11:50:38, so 6 minutes. Then she calls Emily at 11:50:58. So then Jenna texts her again, "Do you guys need me to come get you?" That was at 11:51:01, but Dylan did not read it until 2:12 in the afternoon. So clearly she wasn't really looking at some of these messages because she was still, she just called Emily, "Hey, come over here." Then right before the 911 call, she's on Instagram, 11:54:39 to 11:54:51, 11:55:20 to 11:57:01. So 3 minutes total. So what do we get out of all that? We get that on their phones, they had, or at least Dylan, had 5 hours of inactivity. So she was probably asleep during that time or trying to get sleep. So 5 hours from after she went down to to Bethany's room. 5 hours of inactivity, 2.5 hours on her phone. So out of that 7.5 hours, she was asleep most of the time. And when she was awake, she was frantically trying to get a hold of people, with the exception of not even 8 minutes editing photos and videos. And people are like, well, why was she taking selfies? Well, we don't know. Those could have been photos and videos from the formal on Friday night or the parties that they had on Saturday. She was probably trying to calm herself down and like, okay, I can't get a hold of anyone. I can't sleep. Okay, let me edit these photos. Okay. The defense, not just the prosecution, the defense had all this, okay? They extracted those phones. They know everything. They know what photos she edited. They know what she deleted. They know who she contacted. If anything at all was nefarious, they wouldn't have cleared her, and Ann Taylor would have named her one of the alternate perpetrators, okay? I mean, you can believe she would have shouted it from the rooftops if anything in Dylan's activity would have been helpful to her client. She was doing her job and trying to get the texts and all that stuff, like the excited utterances and everything, tossed so that she could try to say, oh no, these girls weren't scared, blah, blah, blah. So therefore the perpetrator was probably somebody they knew. That's to cast reasonable doubt that it was her client. That's her job. But the fact that she wasn't going, hey, their phone activity shows they were involved or that they did this, you would have heard about it. She had all this. It wasn't withheld from her. Okay. She had all their phone activity. She knows exactly everybody they talk to, every picture. So don't kid yourself that there's some new information that's going to be coming that's somehow damning to Dylan and Bethany. It's not there. But I just wanted to put this in a different perspective because no, they weren't asleep for 8 hours, but they also weren't wide awake the whole time either. And their social media was mostly, or at least Dylan's, trying to get a hold of the roommates. And the, oh my God, so damning because she was editing photos was less than 8 minutes in that whole total time. And as far as her dad, people going, why was she so casual with her dad? She probably didn't want him freaking out and didn't want him hopping in the car and driving 5 hours from Boise. That's not a good highway coming up through there in the winter time, or well, November, late fall. And she probably didn't want to give him any reason to think that, oh, why is my girl living in this college house at 19 years old? Because she still really didn't know what happened. And you also don't want to be the boy that cried wolf, that type of person. Like the sky is falling, Chicken Little, like every analogy you can think of. Like I don't want to be the one to be freaking out and then it turns out to be nothing. But you don't know that. So hindsight is 2020. And this is the thing. We have the luxury of hindsight. We know that 4 people were murdered. Her and Bethany did not know at the time that 4 people were murdered. You have to put hindsight out of your head. And I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. You don't know how you'll react in that situation until you're in that exact same situation. So, and not just similar. A 19-year-old living on her own for the first time out of her sorority house, living with just, you know, friends in a big house by themselves. People coming and going, party atmosphere, being known as the scaredy cat of the house, you know, calling people over before just for hearing a pan fall. You know, what if I'm blowing this out of proportion? You know, the noises she heard, crying, someone's here, etc. Enough to cause fear, but not enough to think somebody's killing anyone. Okay. But, you know, if you're perfect and you're on your high horse, then I guess continue to keep saying you know what you do. But in reality, you don't know what you would do until it happens to you. So give these girls grace. They had nothing to do with the murders. And even if Dylan had called when she saw him in the house, it would not have changed the outcome. That's the bottom line. So blame inmate 163214. He's the murderer. He's the one that did it. Do not blame Dylan and Bethany.